Hola, Dogg from Air fans. Evan Benton, roused from my slumber by another existential threat. That's right, I'm talking about the dreaded monkeypox. So, for anyone who's for whatever reason thinks the monkeypox is some sort of a random event, a natural event, maybe mug global warming forced the poor people of Africa to resort to eating bush meat, and that's where this thing spread. The purpose of this video is to disabuse you of such a notion in a YouTube-friendly way. Because, well, let's just get right to it. That's right, here we go. This event was forecast, planned, focus grouped in November of last year, November 2021. This is a paper from the Nuclear Threat Initiative called Strengthening Global Systems to Prevent and Respond to High-Consequence Biological Threats. Results from the 2021 tabletop exercise conducted in partnership with the Munich Security Conference. And it took place in March 2021. It was released in November 2020. And it took, in the scenario took place in May of 2022, which is right where we are today. What's today's date? The 22nd or the 23rd? Something like that. This scenario takes place starting on May 15th of 2020. So that's what we're looking at. So we're going to talk about the paper itself, and we're just going to go straight through it. Right. So first of all, who are the authors here? Jaime M. Yassif, PhD, Kevin P. Oprah, PhD, and Christopher R. Isaac, Masters in Science. And I just want to underscore the fact that there's no MDs involved, okay? So we're always saying trust the science, trust the doctors. There are no doctors here to trust, okay? Yes, these are PhDs. And what are their PhDs in? So first of all, Jaime M. Yassif, she's got a little bio here, and another network she's involved in, the European Leadership Network, security, another globalist security network here that she's involved with. So she's vice president for global biological policy and programs at NTI, the group who put on this monkeypox focus group. Another little bit of an in-depth bio from NTI where she works, where she's vice president, tells us that her PhD is in biophysics from UC Berkeley. So she knows about biology for sure, but she's biophysics. That's pretty theoretical, not really a practical knowledge of what to do when you get sick. And that's just we're at this place in science these days where what we're talking about is so far removed, so derived from the everyday experience that's how things like this can occur, okay? That's how scenarios like this can occur, and we're just going to see mainly how ridiculous and poorly thought out the monkeypox scenario is. So yeah, it's they're forecasting it, but well, we'll get into that later. So she's involved with this ELN. She's involved with the United States Department of Defense, Department of Health and Human Services, and over at the NTI, she's working on the global biological policy and programs to assess catastrophic risk. Another tabletop exercise that she worked on is this Clade X. So she's working towards the social credit score system related to biology or to a person's individual health risks, which we'll see throughout this scenario as well. That's her. Next, we've got Kevin Oprah. His PhD is in political science. So again, not a doctor. I'm sure he's got something to offer. He's senior vice president of Cadmus, which is a management consulting firm. So think those guys in Office Space, coming in and analyzing a company, getting rid of people who aren't pulling their weight. He also worked at the White House reviewing the federal government's response to Hurricane Katrina. And writes some books written about Russia. Here, A Farewell to Arms. This was published in 1995. So that's going to deal with, proliferation of arms basically after the Cold War, and then another book here, Keeping the Peace in the Borderlands of Russia. What's a borderland of Russia? I'm going to go with Ukraine. So this guy knows a lot about Russia and Ukraine. That's basically his expertise. Nothing in biology, but funnily enough, we're really, Ukraine's really coming to the forefront in terms of this whole monkeypox thing, or at least one of the scenarios, or where it comes from. So, but Chris Isaak, then, he is I'm going to say he's their grad student on this paper. Got his name on the paper, probably did most of the work. He's got a master's in biological sciences, in biochemistry to be specific. So we've got a biophysicist and a biochemist. The Calgary boy, University of Lethbridge. And he's focused on synthetic biology, it says here somewhere. And he's written some papers. These are his papers. He's listed as a co-author on these two for NTI. I don't know about anywhere else, but so he's young. The other two are better connected. That's Chris Isaak, the third author on the paper. So NTIs we're going to look at, but before we look at NTI, we're going to look at the Open Philanthropy group. Now, so they're paying for this, okay? And Open Philanthropy, not linked to Open Society foundations of George Soros, as I would expect. Probably are, but anyway, Open Philanthropy was founded by Dustin Moskovitz, who was a co-founder of Facebook. So all the money for Open Philanthropy, Facebook. And so via Facebook, it's going to connect directly to the PayPal mafia and Peter Thiel via his funding of Facebook, which watching Dogg from Mayor knows all about. The two founders, Carrie Tuna and Dustin Moskovitz, they are a married couple, and they are signatories to the Giving Pledge, which is a initiative from Bill Gates and Warren Buffett that is just a pledge for billionaires to spend all their money on certain things before they die, basically. Openness is what they're about, right? Open philanthropy, and they've got a little tab here about what openness means. So let's find out what it means, right? They're open to many possibilities, blah, blah, blah. That's great. They're open about our work. So sure you are. But anyway, so very often key discussions and decisions happen behind closed doors. What? That sounds like a conspiracy theory to me. Behind closed doors, difficult for outsiders to learn from and critique philanthropists' work. So yeah, we're open. We're open about our work. We tell you what we do, but we balance our commitment to information sharing with our commitment to maximizing our impact and building strong and productive partnerships. That means that if a partner tells them, please don't be open, they won't be open. So that means they're not open. Okay, we say we're open, but we're not. And then a little bit further, it says, we no longer write publicly about our personal relationships with partner organizations. Oh, so they used to be open. Now they have a relationship disclosure policy. Yeah. We used to be open. Now we're not. They kept the name. And I gotta say, the work is licensed under a Creative Commons, right? So it's not commercial. This is free. This paper is free. I downloaded it online, so that means they're good guys, right? Creative Commons. Look at this cute little. Anyway, the other the group that's actually doing the work is this Nuclear Threat Initiative. So who are they? It's a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization founded in 2001 by former U.S. Senator Sam Nunn and philanthropist Ted Turner, conservative who invented the Captain Planet character. So he's a conservative who's really into the environment. We're crossing the aisle there, and Captain Planet was a big part of my childhood, so I find that hilarious. But at any rate, what they've done, so they work on nuclear, biological, radiological, chemical, and cybersecurity existential threats, okay? So this is not, monkeypox is not a nuclear threat, but it's a biological threat, so that's what they do. And keep that in mind because, you know, if they're asked to talk about what a threat something is and somewhere down the line they determine that it's not so much of a threat, are you going to hear about it? Probably not. We need to think about that. So they're coming into anything this nuclear threat initiative does, they're coming into it with the assumption that it is a threat, okay? It is an existential threat. So we just need to keep that in mind. A couple of things they've done is they've made movies. They made the 2000 movie Last Best Chance, which I'd never heard of, but it was on HBO and it was about nuclear threats. They also made a 2010 movie Nuclear Tipping Point, again about nuclear threats, and President Obama thought it was so good he showed it at the White House in 2010. Read about the rest of the stuff they've done if you're interested in, but we're looking more at the networks, and so their advisors. Well, look, Ted Turner is still included as a co-chairman. Warren Buffett is on the board of directors, or he's an advisor. Here's Open Philanthropy Project, which was the first thing we mentioned, and they've got a link to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So plenty of links there. And then here's the table of contents. Got some people to acknowledge. The first is the Munich Security Conference, where this was held. The Munich Security Conference is just another, globalist conference. It takes place in Munich every year, and I thought it was interesting that this year's conference, the 2022 conference, was, according to Wikipedia, largely dominated by the Russia-Ukraine situation. So this year, the conference took place from February 18th to February 20th, and Russia invaded the Ukraine on February 24th, 4 days later. So that shows you the effectiveness that this security conference has on global security. That is to say, not very much. Now, we have to also acknowledge Dr. Andrew Hebler, who is now serving in government, it says, at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. I assumed that meant he had just been appointed by President Biden, but I learned that he actually also served in the same role under President Obama. So we are directly linking our project to the White House here. And I'm going to start highlighting the word catastrophic, just so that we can count the number of times they use it in this first forward here. That's one. Have the co-authors here. Going into the forward, this is just going to talk about how important this scenario is, how much of an existential threat it is. I don't know if you can be more of a threat than existential, but catastrophic. Catastrophe caused by deliberate misuse of the tools of modern biology or by a laboratory accident. So this is cute, and this is a theme. We're really looking at biological warfare here without saying the words biological warfare. And we're seeing biological research, biology as a double-edged sword throughout this whole scenario. This is what the people see it as. We have to control science because on the one hand, it can heal, but on the other hand, it can create monkeypox. And then this sentence here, we are only as safe as our weakest link. That is false. And what that means, is that the statement, we are only as safe as our weakest link, as it relates to pandemics is this idea that a person will get infected by a virus and the virus will turn them into a virus factory. So you have one person who does not cover their face, or one person who does not get the magic potion, and they are transformed by the virus into an asymptomatic virus factory, going around and contaminating all the healthy people. And that is just not true. Basically what happens in a disease is, if the disease goes around, which there's a lot of problems with that, but I'm not going to talk about it in this video, but the people who are weak get sick. The weakest links get sick, and the normal links and the strong links do not get sick. That's how disease works. Susceptible to the disease, you might get sick. But if you're not susceptible to the disease, if you're taking steps such as eating healthy, you most likely are not threatened by any of these pandemics. Serious risks: bioscience, technology, accidental release, deliberate abuse, catastrophic. We cannot afford to be reactive. We must take a no regrets approach. No regrets. We're going to see this a lot. They're going to keep repeating this no regrets, always in quotes for some reason. And to that, I would just respond: 14.9 million excess deaths associated with the pandemic. Okay, so what this means, 14.9 million deaths associated, that means that happened during the time, but were not caused by. And it's not going to tell us in this article here, but the claim is that 6 million deaths were caused by the pandemic. 15 million deaths, including those 6 million, happened at the same time. So that means that just a little bit less than 2 times the number of deaths that were caused by the pandemic were caused by the response to the pandemic, the reaction, if you will. Deaths caused by lockdown, not people putting off necessary health care, on and on and on. And so just about twice as many people were killed by our response as were killed by the thing itself. So I really think maybe we could afford to be more reactive with it. We could afford to be a little bit regretful. And again, just for context, this is coming out in November of 2021. So by this point, we definitely knew that. We had a lot, over a year of evidence pointing to that fact. So, of course, problem, reaction, solution. We need a new global biosecurity entity, a new bureaucracy to take over this. Catastrophic, accidents, inadvertent misuse or deliberate abuse. And then, of course, we need some new bankers to get involved, or the same bankers. Who wrote this? This would be our first medical doctor on the team, Margaret Hamburg. She does work for the Nuclear Threat Initiative as well. And we're going to get into her a little bit because, boy, she's got quite the Wikipedia article. Margaret and Peggy Hamburg. So she's been in politics for a long time. Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration approving drugs under Barack Obama. Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services under Bill Clinton starting in 1997. And then before that, she was the Health Commissioner of New York City under Rudy Giuliani, and before him, David Dinkins, the first African-American mayor of New York City, I believe. Her mother and her father were both medical doctors, psychiatrists to be precise, and Beatrix Hamburg's claim to fame was that she was the first self-identified black woman at Vassar and Yale. That's what Wikipedia wants you to know about her. David Hamburg had a little bit more of an illustrious career, also at Yale, where they both met. They got their MD at Yale. They worked together doing research to study human coping processes under severe stress, from physical stress to mental illness, severe depression, poverty, and war. I got that from an obituary of Dr. Hamburg, Mr. Dr. Hamburg. So that puts them, by my reckoning, at least MK Ultra adjacent, right? And again, if you're watching EvDog for Mayor, I'm assuming you're familiar with MK Ultra. Studying the human response to stress and how that can be used to manipulate people is basically, as far as we can tell, the whole purpose of that. And we're dealing, of course, with a very, very stressful situation right now with the pandemic, the food shortages, the other pandemic, the bird flu, blah, blah, blah. Now we're running out of power, global warming. So we're dealing with a lot of stress. And her parents basically spent their entire careers studying human response to stress, and that might be why she's in her position. Her father, David Hamburg, was the president of the Carnegie Corporation of New York from 1982 to 1997, about 15 years. So you'll be familiar with them as well from the Flexner Report. I won't get into. Then her husband is an interesting guy as well. Peter Fitzhugh Brown, no picture. Well, he's the CEO of the American hedge fund Renaissance Technologies, or RenTech, which deals with algorithmic trading. It's a hedge fund that specializes in the use of computer trading, which a lot of people say is the vast majority of trading that goes on the stock market. Got his degree from Harvard. Oh, Carnegie Mellon University is where he got his computer science PhD from. And crossing the aisles again, RenTech, this company was the #1 donor to Donald Trump during the 2016 campaign, and the number 3 donor, where does it say that, to Hillary Clinton. So, interestingly, I can't remember which Wikipedia article page it said that on, but anyway, oh, here it is, right on hers. So, #1 donor to Trump, #3 donor to Hillary, but they actually gave a little bit more money to Hillary than they did to Trump, 16.5 versus 15.5, respectively. So it's good that her husband now works in algorithmic trading, because his father, who's another Wikipedia article, invented the money market fund. Can't begin to explain to you what a money market fund is, but it's a derivative that's based on bonds, like that. So it directly enabled the current market that we're dealing with. And another thing he did is he was on the team that invented Deep Blue, which was the first computer to defeat a human being, Garry Kasparov, in a game of chess. And while he was working at IBM, he tried to sell them the idea of an algorithmic credit score system. So that's another link we have to the social credit system. Her husband is working on that. He's an AI expert. And let's see. Go down to her FDA work. 2 months prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, Hamburg was a member to a meeting titled Universal Flu Vaccine, dated October 29th, 2019, with other government officials, including Anthony Fauci, speaking about the need to, quote, blow up the system in order to bypass regulatory control on mRNA vaccines. Bypass regulatory control on mRNA vaccines. Also discussed in the meeting held at Milken Institute School of Public Health was the need to create an, quote, aura of excitement and make influenza sexy in order to revive government funding, have hyper production of the mRNA vaccines, which she and others in the meeting believed were superior to the traditional egg-based vaccines. So, wow, That's right from Wikipedia, folks. This is not hard. During her tenure at the FDA, the agency was criticized for speeding approvals at the expense of safety. While some industry voices indicated the pace was justified. The FDA, under Hamburg's leadership, approved 51 drugs in 2014 alone, which was noted as being, quote, the most in more than 20 years. So a little bit of a balanced approach there, right? It was criticized, but some people say it was justified. Approved the most drugs, 14, more than in 20 years. So good to have a little bit of a number there so you can evaluate those claims on your own. But again, this is just from Wikipedia. Now, she was president of the American Academy for the Advancement of Sciences. On that, her father David was also president of the American Academy for the Advancement of Sciences. So no nepotism there. I'm sure they are both highly qualified science. Everything they're doing is based on science. Now, some of her links down here, we have, she's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. She's a member of the Gates Foundation, a member of the Global Health Science Advisory Committee for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Oh, and we can't just pass by Alnylam Pharmaceuticals without comment because loads. Alnylam Pharmaceuticals is currently suing Pfizer and Moderna for a patent violation. So they are alleging that they developed some of the technology underneath the mRNA devices, and Pfizer and Moderna are both using them without permission. So that's going on right now. This is separate from the Arbutus Biopharma, USO, love that. Another lawsuit that's going on right now, and she's a member of the board of directors since 2018. While she was a member of the board of directors for this mRNA company, she was working to speed up the approval of, not while she was a chairman, but she was at a government meeting. So, all right, she's a member of the board for Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. She's a member of the Wellcome Trust, which we've seen in a previous video. And of course, she served on the board of the Rockefeller Foundation, Rockefeller University, blah, 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 FR again. So we're seeing all this, the same things over and over again. This is not hard to see, guys. Legal issues. In 2016, Hamburg, her husband, along with Johnson & Johnson, among others, were named in a lawsuit. And I should note that among others includes her husband's company, Rentec, alleging that they were suppressing safety information about the drug Levaquin. So in the end, that suit got dismissed by a judge. So obviously, everything's on the level there. But at any rate, at one time, Johnson & Johnson faced around 3,400 lawsuits in connection to that drug. Levaquin is an antibiotic which can cause tendon rupture as a side effect. That is wonderful. And a final note, this is just really interesting. Her brother is another guy I want to talk about. Her brother, Eric Hamburg. He's a lawyer and a film producer. So as a producer, he has only three films listed here, but Any Given Sunday and Nixon are two of them. So if you're under the impression that Oliver Stone is one of the good guys, for some reason, sorry to tell you that he's linked to this whole thing through Eric Hamburg, and he made another propaganda movie. So we're seeing some movie directors, we're seeing some propagandists. Oh look, Sam Nunn, the one of the co-founders along with Ted Turner of that nuclear threat initiative, was starred in this movie. Interesting. So moving on then, that was Dr. Hamburg. And for the executive summary, it's gonna be short. All right. So this is just the summary of what we're gonna talk about, right? What the scenario is gonna deal with. The fictional nation of Brinia has a monkeypox outbreak, and because it doesn't matter. So this is what is, you know, we have to just realize is the origin of the disease, the origin of the existential threat does not matter to these people, right? You would think that, you know, if it was on an island nation, for example, that would be important, right? You would think about like how close you were to that nation. That might be important, but these people conceive of these things in such a abstract sense. They don't care. It's just as long as, you know, again, they're not medical doctors. They don't know how diseases work. They just want to manage the reaction to these existential threats. So they don't care where it comes from. They just, oh, it's a terrorist attack. For some reason I put this in red, fictional pandemic. Hope that doesn't get me flagged. And then the result is 3 billion cases and 270 million fatalities. So 270 million out of 8 billion people on the planet is around 3% of the global population. So that puts what we're talking about up there with the Spanish flu, which we also don't know what the origin of that is, or do we, right? Fictional nation of Spain, if you will. But they don't have the medical background to be able to look at that and say, huh, that's huge, right? They you know, this is the kind of thing where we can just say extraordinary claims call for extraordinary evidence. They just don't have it. They don't care about the evidence, right? All they want is the reaction. Early warning system, and we should do this all on a no regrets basis. Here we have it again. And then biological research government. Oh, I forgot to highlight. I've been trying to highlight dual use in this article because dual use biological research is a euphemism for germ warfare, and that is indicating that we cannot legislate against the development of biological weapons, because in these people's opinion, the same technology that can be used to do things like PCR analysis, genetic analysis, can also be used to develop weapons. So the idea that germ warfare research was, you know, outlawed by certain treaties in such and such a date is made obsolete just by this euphemism, dual use biological research. Of course, we have insufficient financing. We need more banking involved. And that's what these people care about. The World Health Organization, Public Health Alert System, United Nations, joint assessment mechanism we're going to come up with, algorithms. National governments must adopt a no regrets approach. Must not regret. Regret is not an option. No regrets, again, international entity, we're coming up with a new body. Abuse of bioscience, funding means banks. Security fund means banks. Now supply chain, the very end we're going to talk about supply chain. And we're talking about centralizing the supply chain, of course. And very end is where we get down, or that's the end. The very end of what we're going to talk about talks about supply chain. It's like the least important thing. And nowhere in this whole section are they going to talk about food at all. So they don't care about clean water or healthy food. They only care about medical and public health supplies. Well, maybe public health supplies includes food and water, but this is the, we've completely written out things that actually matter to the human body, to health, from the equation, from the list of potential responses, right? List of potential responses only includes medical response, and the medical response isn't even involving medical doctors. It's involving biophysicists, physicists, and biochemists, and political scientists. And lastly, we've got a note here. NTI developed these recommendations after the event concluded. Participants were not involved in their development and have not been asked to endorse them. So we had this scenario. We went and we asked these people what they would do in this scenario, and we took their responses and we wrote our own thing. And we don't have any idea based on this what the connection is between the whole deal is and the paper that I'm reading. Alrighty, and then about the exercise, we're still talking about the same thing. So we have 19 people involved besides the 3 writers. Their expertise is in public health, biotechnology, international security, and philanthropy. So not medicine, again, not medicine. Fictional country of Brinia, terrorist attack, 3 billion cases, and they developed this thing. Well, so they this says at the bottom here, they developed this scenario using experts in. So just as the other pandemic was kicking off, science-based. Yeah, right. Dual-use bioscience research again, international financing, and I'm gonna go through these guys just a little bit because we already have spent so much time talking about the main people, but these are the people who actually participated in the exercise, and again, we have no idea what that participation entailed, but I just highlighted doctor because I want to know what kind of expertise. So Dr. Ernest J. Moniz is a theoretical physicist. SICPA is a company that manufactures currency ink. They're involved in security for currencies, like dollar bills, actual paper currency. Dr. Beth Cameron, she has a PhD in biology, that's close, and she works on the National Security Council. I don't know how to say that name, Draghi Akli, she has an MD and a PhD, so she's an MD. The PhD part is in human genetics. She works for Johnson & Johnson, and specifically at Janssen, developed their particular heavy. Dr. Elias, he is an MD and a Master of Public Health, so he's a doctor, he's a physician as well as a epidemiologist. All you can do if you have those 2 credentials is work for a foundation such as the Gates Foundation. Another link to the Wellcome Trust. Dr. George Chow is a biochemist, and he works for the China CDC. Dr. Maggie Hamburg, we've already met. Sorry, Peggy Hamburg. Dr. Emily LaProust is an organic chemist. She works for Twist Biosciences, which develops synthetic DNA. That will be another mRNA link, I would imagine. I couldn't find Dr. Elizabeth Lice's field, but I believe it's linguistics because all of her published papers are in linguistics, so that's a United Nations link. Dr. Nkengasong from the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. He has a PhD in virology. Fake. Dr. Michael Ryan is another MD, PhD for the World Health Organization. Dr. Joy St. John, I couldn't find what her doctorate is in. She has a master's in public health, though, so I'm going to assume that she also has a doctorate in public health. She doesn't list that on her LinkedIn, which is odd. CARPHA stands for the Caribbean Public Health Agency. And finally, we have Dr. Petra Wickland, a pharmacist for a pharmacy company, so that makes sense. Now, here is the way this thing went down, step-by-step approach. So this is just bizarre, and this just undermines this entire approach, in my opinion. Now, so step-by-step means they were given a scenario, a move they call it, and asked how they would respond, and ... then they were given the next move. So they have no idea how the one move relates to the next move. That's absolutely bizarre. Again, it's just underscoring the fact that they don't care. They don't really want to know about the science of pandemics. They just want there to be an existential threat. It's like some Hollywood writer just comes up with a bonkers premise, and then they can just take it and run with it. Use that stress to manipulate people's reaction to that stress, because that appears that's their real expertise. So that reflects the limits of information. We don't know where this thing came from. We don't know how it got to the next step and previous or subsequent steps, right? So, pandemic of unknown origin, of course, because again, they don't care. So to end here, we're just going to talk about this the scenario, just this graph, which I think a lot of people have seen. I've seen it passed around the internet. So the end of video 1, this topic is going to be this thing here. So yeah. Oh, and what's missing from this whole thing, you'll note, is the coronavirus. Okay. So we're starting the attack. They don't know it's an attack yet, but May 15th, 2022. Nowhere in the scenario design is the fact that there's already another pandemic going on, right? Or even 2 if you include bird flu, which I certainly will. It's killed millions of chickens. Hope you know about that. Hope you've been following that. So we don't include the fact in the scenario setup that there's actually 2 ongoing pandemics already. So, but move 1 takes place on June 5th, 2020, the fake country of Brinia, and out of 1,421 cases, there's 4 deaths. So that's a 0.3% fatality rate. And we have no link here. We're going to get into sort of the specifics, but we have no link here to anything like, gay music festivals or anything like that. It's just travelers. But another thing that doesn't match up with reality, our reality, is that there's no international warnings in this scenario or advisories. You can just go to the World Health Organization right now, reload the page, and you can see that there's plenty of stuff on monkeypox. Doesn't mention it, but there's an emergency meeting going on right now. There was on May 13th, which was, let's see, 2 days before the attack, World Health Organization had a meeting on the virus research for the same or related virus supposedly it's causing. So they're really up on it. Okay, up at the top we've got this interesting photo, which I apologize for if it's grossing you out, but that really looks photoshopped to you when they zoom in like that. It doesn't look like the light sources really line up coming from. But all the articles about monkeypox are going to have this photo or this photo, right? They're all having the same photo. You don't see any white people. Else, right? So there's no international warning here in the scenario, but real world, we're having international meetings. We're saying we're going back into lockdown in certain countries. But keep in mind, this whole scenario is designed to redefine what an international warning means, what constitutes an international warning. So it may very well be that by their definition in the scenario, the World Health Organization's response is inadequate, and really anything short of totalitarianism, the World Health Organization treaty being signed and all the nations giving over their power to the World Health Organization, immediately, without regrets, constitutes is the only thing that would constitute an advisory. So move 2 is 9 months later. They say it's 6 months later in their write-up, but anyway, that's a long time, okay? So think about what happened within 9 months in the pandemic that starts with the C, right? Think about going from March to December of 2020, and just I think it's just absolutely bonkers that we could just say we went from 4 deaths to 1.3 million deaths, and that's all we have to say about it. Okay, all we have to say is that the monkeypox was engineered to be vaccine resistant, right? And that we can critique national responses at this point. And there's international supply chain challenges now, as opposed to at the beginning of the scenario. So I just want to point out how different this is from our reality. We're up to a 2% case fatality rate, which is, we've gone from 0.3% to 2%, getting stronger, interesting. But we already have a vaccine. I can't remember what it was called, but we already have a monkeypox vaccine. It was cunningly developed recently. We also have a intravenous treatment that was approved by the FDA last year, I believe. So this is different from the SPARS scenario, which I talked about recently as well, because in that scenario we had treatment, and in this thing we're saying we don't have treatment. So, but anyway, then move 3, we're on to a year later, right? A 10th full year later, and now we're up to 27 million deaths. So the case fatality rate is 5.6%. So the virulence of this disease at this point is doubling every 6 months. So what's going on there? Why would the case fatality rate double every 6 months? And if it did, why would it stop? Why wouldn't it just kill everybody on the planet, right? Why wouldn't it just keep doubling and doubling and doubling? And there's a good reason for that, and the reason is that once it gets to a certain virulence, it's not going to spread anymore because everyone who gets infected by it is going to die. If this were a real thing, wouldn't be able to spread because they would be dead. But we're not going to talk about that in this scenario because we're so removed from reality. And here we have it, the revelation of terror group origins a year later, and infiltration of civilian biolabs, right? Dual use civilian bioresearch. That's just laughable, right? Because we all know that it's the nation states that are conducting this type of research. Sure, they might farm out some of it to the civilians, but there you go. So it took a year. It took a year for our intelligence agencies to suss out that it was a terror group that caused this thing. How would you feel if you were in intelligence? You were in intelligence reading this. It's embarrassing. They failed to do their job. They failed to, gather intelligence and figure out the cause. So the final death toll, 2023, roundtable, 271 million deaths, which is 8% case fatality rate. So the case fatality rate kept increasing. And then, just like in the SPARS pandemic, the disease just ends. We don't know what happened. We don't know what helped, right? All we know is that global differences in national responses contribute to significantly variable outcomes. So apparently, we're at the point where we can assess outcomes, but we don't know really why. Okay, the disease scenario just ends. So that's just bonkers again. National financing, is one of the key takeaways for them. So, boy, that was a long one, and I'm just going to do another one. I'm going to stop it here because the next one is just going to get even more boring. So that's all you need to know about this scenario and its ridiculousness. If you are glutton for ridiculousness, stick around for part 2. This has been Evan Benton of Dogg from Air. Share this video, comment below, and thanks for watching. Have a good night.